Nice Speech Lady. Useful resources for medical SLPs. Created by one who is just like you out in the field. Creative, practical, evidence-based resources. Building up, learning from one another.
Hello, welcome back to Nice Speech Lady Show. Glad you joined us. Wanted to let you know that we've got a great show today. We have guest Gwen Griffin. She's the creator of What's Next, which is a cognitive retraining program through Northern Speech Services. And she is going to be speaking with us later on here in a little bit. Wanted to first talk to you about a new resource that I recently had posted on the website. Wanted to, those of you that aren't aware of my website is nicespeechlady.com, and wanted to invite you to check out the website. So let's go to the website and we'll take you there. And nicespeechlady.com is a resource website for speech therapists, and it is a website that also has a blog, and the website is a hub of a place for all sorts of information for speech therapists to go to get information about speech therapy topics, and it's a great place for people to get information for free. Everything on the website is free. So nicespeechlady.com. The resource that I want to go over today is the Nice Speech Lady Tools for Screening and Referrals. So this is a resource that I published on January 18th, 2021. And this is a packet that has two components to it. This packet is both a speech screening tool and a nursing and provider referral screening tool. So let's go ahead and click on it and dig right in. So the first one is the speech screening form. So there's a section for reported versus observed symptoms. And the first page looks at communication and cognition and other aspects of communication deficits. So if there's areas of involvement in any of these areas, the clinician will either indicate reported or observed, from hearing loss to resonance to orientation to executive functioning to articulation to new onset of stuttering to the presence of a neurological diagnosis and there's a need for an evaluation, appropriate loudness difficulties, word finding. So just there's just a checkbox if there's any issues there. There's also a section on a lot of these areas for notes, short-term memory difficulties, problem solving, difficulty with breath support. There's also a section here for other down at the bottom. And then page 2 is for swallowing, from oral phase to difficulty with breathing patterns during swallowing to a tracheotomy being present to difficulties with swallowing pills to esophageal difficulties, laryngeal phase, any of these factors being present, a swallowing history of difficulty, any type of intubation history, history of weight loss, fear of choking, just any of these areas. Again, also some of them being eligible for reported or observed indications. And then there's a section for at the bottom for a yes or a no, and if there's going to be a request for a speech pathology evaluation. The second component of this packet is the same sections just for nursing or another provider to fill out that they have observed a deficit in any of these areas and they're requesting a speech evaluation. So again, just the same areas, and then at the bottom, a section for request for a speech evaluation. So these forms might be really helpful in a skilled nursing facility setting for communication about the request for a referral. Might also be helpful in other settings as well, a home health setting, other types of residential settings, assisted livings, maybe in an outpatient setting. So these are tools that might be helpful to you. So please use them. They're available on the website on a PDF version, and they're available to you to download. So next, we'll move into our interview component of the show. All right, well, we have Gwen A. Griffin. She graduated with a master's degree from Temple University in 1993, and she has since been focused on evidence-based approaches in her own practice. Working in the language lab of Albert Einstein's renowned Moss Rehab Hospital for her CFY sparked her interest in research. At that time, she helped conduct aphasia studies with the late Eleanor Safran, PhD. Her thirst for discovering evidence-based practice approaches was further developed through her career in multiple settings with diverse populations. Gwen focused on program development in her various positions as an SLP, developing family and caregiver education programs and peer-reviewed protocols. The idea for What's Next was born out of determination to develop an evidence-based program to help people living with dementia and their caregivers. She is currently working on expanding the What's Next program to include frameworks for residential living, as well as artificial intelligence to aid the What's Next families in their home. A transplant from Medea, Pennsylvania, Gwen lives in Sarasota, Florida, where she is preparing for a year-long cruise around the Great American Loop on her trawler, Amazing Pace, in 2022. I bet that's going to be exciting. Welcome, welcome, Gwen. Thank you to the show. Thank you for coming to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
So you have quite a bio there. Tell us about what's next. That's why I asked you on the show. We've been talking on Facebook for quite a while before we ever started talking about what's next. And then you told me what was going on. So please tell us about what's next.
Yeah, so it has been a really long haul, but I guess 4 years in the scope of something pretty cool coming out isn't that long at all. But so the idea to create some sort of cognitive-based therapy for my cognitively impaired patients was kind of brewing my whole career, because I felt like where I was hitting the nail on the head with things like dysphagia and with speech, and I wasn't quite hitting the nail on the head when it came to cognition. I noticed that some things were working sometimes and some things were not working sometimes, and I couldn't put my finger on why the things were working when they were. So there was a need, and I became frustrated because I kept starting to hear that same line over and over again, which is for cognitive patients, we evaluate or we assess and we stage their cognitive deficits, and then we educate the family. And I really felt like I wanted to help the patient and the client more than that, but felt at a loss at what was the best way to go about doing that. So also over the years, there became more pressure to utilize standardized tests and objective measures. And I felt like the tests that I had, even though they were great at what they were supposed to do, which is to assess the presence or absence of dementia or cognitive deficits, or assess the level or the severity of dementia, they weren't really helping me to formulate my goals, and they weren't showing that I made progress with my patients when I retested, because they were basically tests that told you whether a patient had dementia or not. And we all know that dementia is progressive, and it's not going to be that they have less dementia when we go and retest. So I was missing a component of objective measures to show progress with cognition. Then at the same time, we started hearing of more cognitive therapy denials by payer sources. And so, and that was fueled by some pretty damning research from one of, in particular, was called the Cochrane Review, where they reviewed, the Cochrane people reviewed a lot of different types of traditional cognitive training tools. And they determined year after year that there was very little in terms of establishing skills and carrying over those skills in the long term with these patients, especially with the tools that we had at the time. So I decided that I was going to look into what works with dementia patients. What does work? What do we know works? Well, something that I had been trained in schooling, and that I know that we've been advocating for when we go see our patients, or at least I have, is this concept of routine. So it seems pretty basic that routine would help our patients be more comfortable and know what's expected in their environment. But my big question was, what was it about routine? What is it tapping into that we're not yet understanding that we might be able to utilize by teaching our patients new tasks, or just, I wanted to learn more about what routine is and why it's helpful. So I did this ex post facto research study over the years. I didn't say I'm going to do a research study, but I just started to research routine, and I found myself in neurobehavioral research, looking up information, neuropsych information, and I discovered that the reason, or one of the reasons why routine is so helpful, is that it taps into a motor or procedural memory, which is a kind of memory that is more likely to be preserved in our dementia patients, where they may not be able to discuss that they brushed their teeth this morning. You put a toothbrush in their hand, their motor memory will help them to brush their teeth. They know how to brush their teeth because that is motor memory that has been stored in the brain that hasn't been lost yet. And so this discovery was really cool to me. And I started imposing a routine upon the patients that I worked with to see exactly how, if it worked. So I would add an extra task, like maybe looking in the calendar after they eat their dinner. So the routine and the motor memory would be the act or the event of eating dinner and then crossing off the calendar. And it was as simple as that. And it started working. And I had patients and families who said, yeah, he does it every night. Now, it didn't work with everybody. It worked with a certain amount of patients, and I was able to develop what kind of patients it actually worked with. And then I began to set up an assessment so that we could and picked a few different tasks, 6 actually, so that these particular six tasks that were important to my patients and my patients' families were assessed utilizing an independence measure. And so that became the beginning of the assessment protocol that's included with the What's Next program. I took all of this stuff, I wrote it out, and I just so happened to see call for papers for ASHA in 2019. And I applied to present my program. I did not expect them to say, sure, come on in and speak about your program. And as a matter of fact, the letter that I got said that it had been a very, very competitive year, and that whoever got in was lucky to be able to present their program. And I was one of them. And I was so excited about it. So I presented the program, and once it was accepted for presentation, I contacted publishers and I asked them if they were interested in publishing, my program once it was completed. And I got my proposal accepted from Northern Speech Services. It was accepted from a few others, but Northern Speech Services really seemed to have the good questions to ask me. They really were invested in, knowing more about the program. And I felt very, very supportive. And so I took my program to a trademark attorney because I wanted to protect the name What's Next. And he said, well, this looks to me like it's a patent, not just a trademark. And so we set out to get the patent. And now I'm sitting with the program What's Next. It's patent pending, and it's being offered by Northern Speech Services, and I'm really excited about it.
Awesome. Well, I had the opportunity to take your CEU, and loved it. So I was wondering, what is the biggest why for What's Next? So, why is the biggest question? Why would someone want to take the course? What is the biggest reason why someone would want to go to the website and sign up?
Well, I do find that a lot of clinicians, like on my Facebook pages and things like that, there's a lot of questions about good cognitive therapy, good cognitive assessments. And I think What's Next provides an entire protocol, not only of justification for why we're using it and the program itself, but the materials that are included, I think, are invaluable because they help set goals that's based on the program. I include goals that are based on the program. It has an assessment that's built in that can help clinicians not only monitor the patient's progress, but prove that they're making a difference in these patients' lives, in our patients' ability to carry out particular tasks. So I think that it speaks to those therapists who were looking for more in the area of cognition.
What was the biggest surprise that came your way as you were developing this program?
That's a great question. What the biggest surprise was is at the time I was developing the program, I was reading a book called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And that's by an author by Joe Dispenza. And this is a metaphysical author who talks about how we can use the power of the universe to change our lives. And while I was listening to that book, he had mentioned this idea about habit. And of course, it's breaking the habit of being yourself. And his idea was we want to stop the behaviors that we're performing in order to create a new self. Well, I looked at it like, oh, these behaviors create us. So he create us in our interaction with the environment. And he quoted this, I think it was a neuropsychologist from the 1950s that said, what wires together fires together, which meant that two events, in my mind, two events that are fused together will will trigger the next event. The one event will trigger the next event. And that was the whole premise of the What's Next program. And it was almost like the answer to why it worked was delivered through this book that had nothing to do with cognitive therapy at all.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So tell me more about your research. I know you did a lot of research in the process. Is there more you can tell my readers about the research?
I can. So there are a couple research models, and we all know of the clinical trial research model, which What's Next does not have. Hopefully it will in the future. But the type of research model that I used was an ex post facto research, which actually translates to after the fact. So it's basically when we know a specific phenomenon, let's say cancer, there's a higher rate of cancer in one neighboring town, and the other neighboring town has a lower rate of cancer. So the researchers will go in and decide what factors was contributing to that higher level of cancer. Of course, they're not going to go give people cancer, so and see what happens. So with an ex post facto research study, I took the phenomenon of routine that we know helps, but we didn't know why. And I set out to determine why routine helps our patients who have dementia. And I found that in the research that I studied, that there are different memory centers in the brain. And one of the difficult memory centers to access is called declarative memory. But one of the easier centers to access is motor memory. And this procedural memory, our patients had more access to. And I learned about this through my research. And so that procedural memory was relatively preserved. So it really, all this information really contributed to the theory that if we put two events together and we give it enough time to perform these two events, will these two events fuse together, and will they be able to perform? And that was really, it was an after the fact study. And I would like to do more research in this with my the assessment, as well as how well that the program works with a certain candidate.
Okay, so you're hoping that there'll be more research down the line. That's kind of what's next for What's Next?
Yes, absolutely. I did look into how I could get funding for research for What's Next, and I looked into ASHA, and I contacted a few dementia and Alzheimer's groups, but there doesn't seem to be that much funding for people who are not PhDs, which that's myself. I'm not a PhD.
Right.
So we're hoping that maybe somebody in higher education decides to do some research and uses What's Next.
Right. So if someone out there is a PhD and is looking to do a research study, how would they contact you if they're interested in that?
Well, I have a lot of different pages. So I have a What's Next Facebook page, and that's news about the programs, like the upcoming events and interviews and things like that. And there's a contact on that, and they can contact me directly by sending me an instant message. There is a What's Next private group that was set up on Facebook for peer support. So those that have taken the course can join the group and help those that either are deciding whether to take the course or that have questions. And that I can be accessed directly from that page. I have a Twitter account, What's Next TX Twitter account, and you can direct message me from there. I have a website, what'snexttx.com, and even through Northern Speech Services, I can be contacted.
Okay. Well, I had prepared this question. I think it's pretty obvious just in how you're answering the questions, but where does your passion and interest lie in developing the program? I think it's pretty obvious in how you're answering the questions, but I'll still ask you the question, where does your passion and interest lie in the program?
My passion lies more like outside the program, because I really wanted to make a difference in something. I've always felt like I wanted to make a difference. I always felt like I wanted to change something. It's been just, in general, that's what fuels me, the passion to make a difference. And it's good to make a positive difference as opposed to a negative one. So I do want to make a positive difference in the lives of the people that I treat. And I've always felt a connection to my clients. They weren't clients, they're human beings. And I want to be able to truly help them. So it came from a real desire to help people who I felt like I wasn't helping. So that's really where it was.
Well, tell us about the class itself. How long is the course? How do people sign up for it?
Okay. Sure. So the class itself is set up as a PowerPoint presentation and auditory. So you see visual and auditory. So it's basically a video of me discussing the screen, the PowerPoint presentation on a screen. But that's about a half an hour, 40 minutes. And the next half an hour is basically, you can see it's an enactment or reenactment of how the program is set up, how I interact with my patients, how I educate the patient about what we're doing, how the program is rolled out through the course of therapy. And there are sections on goal writing with examples. There's an extremely long section about the whole assessment. So that's it reenacted. The questions are asked and the assessment sheets are marked off. And even there's a reenactment of the reassessment as well. So it's a case study basically, but it's done in a reenactment sort of a way. And then there's a course assessment.
Right. Really, really good course. I really enjoyed taking the course. It was really informative. And I thought the way that you laid it out with modeling how to do it was really helpful. Rather than explaining this is how you do it, you actually showed how to do it. And then reflections on breaking it down was really helpful too. So I thought it was really good. And all in all, it takes people about how long to do it. It took me about 2.5, 3 hours, but how long does it take most people to take?
About 2 hours.
About 2 hours.
Yeah, about 2 hours. And so I try not to make the course assessment too difficult, but very understandable. But, I'm glad that you mentioned about the way in which it was presented, because we worked really hard on that. I wrote the script and I had actors, and they were amazing actors. Yeah. They did a great job. But all of that was Northern Speech Services' idea. I remember Tom Slominski, who's the owner of Northern Speech Services, said, well, how are you going to show people how to use it? Yeah, you can tell people how to use it, but how are you going to show people how to use it? And that was his brilliant idea, and I think it worked out great.
Yeah, I think it was good. It was really good.
Thanks.
So let me just ask you in conclusion, just what question did I not ask you that you wish I would have asked you in conclusion of anything else you'd like to talk about?
Okay, that is a good question. So recently, a clinician who took the program wrote to us, and she very thoughtfully asked a question. And it was, I had different answers than you on the AMPS. Basically, she was asking why I chose specific scores that I chose, because she would have chosen different scores. And I said, that's a really, really good question, because inter-rater reliability is very important on standardized tests. However, the AMPS is not really a standardized test. We have not done enough clinical research to make it a standardized test. What it is a performance scale. And so while inter-rater reliability is very, very important, to me, it's more important to have intra-rater reliability, meaning that the clinician is consistent in the way they answer the questions so that the measurement of their progress can be demonstrated. And so while we don't have a standardized test, every effort is made to help inter-rater reliability by using the FIM model for our model, because that's an already established model, and a decision tree that is also there to support the FIM, which we include to make the scoring more reliable. But inter-rater reliability is going to vary on a subjectively scored test. And but the intra-rater reliability, meaning if I'm consistent with how I score from one test to the other, then I'll be able to show this improvement. And the fact that it's not standardized doesn't impact on whether the veracity of the test itself in its ability to show improvement.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, I thought the decision tree was really interesting, really helpful. I could tell you really put a lot of thought into all of that information. So
yeah, and the candidate selection too, I think, is really important, because I don't know how many times I've either observed therapists or they've observed, I don't know how many times that there are patients who just are not going to be a good candidate because of their inability to accept that they have a deficit. And those are not going to be patients that or clients that we're going to work with this program. We want somebody who might be a little reluctant, but can accept that they need some help and they can participate in the program.
Right. Well, thank you for taking the time to participate in this interview. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think it was a great interview and I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Wilson.
Yeah.
Bye.
Well, that is it for our show today. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We appreciate your time and participating and watching the show. Special thanks to Gwen Griffin for her time in the interview today. Want to thank you for joining us, and please check out, thanking you in advance for checking out nicespeechlady.com. Please also join the Facebook group SLP Support and Nice Speech Lady, as well as liking the Nice Speech Lady Facebook page. Find us on Twitter, find us on Instagram, and please continue to tell your friends about the website. And thanks again for your time, and make it a great day. Thanks again. Bye-bye.